Ladies and gentlemen, Christoph the Polish Geek, and here we are with the review of Castlevania Nocturne, because I woke up in the morning and binged the whole thing right away because I was so much looking forward to it. And first thing I will say though is that the show is not as good as the first series. Like, the first series is, I would still probably put it in like my top 10 favorite shows of all time actually, and it's certainly one of my favorite animated shows ever. While this, it's good, but I can't say it quite reaches the heights of the original one. And there are some things that I have to say are kind of problematic. Although, that said, the last two episodes more than made up for any issues I had while watching. And the latest scene was simply an amazingness incarnate. It was simply... The last scene was simply incredible, and I was literally like, I jumped out of my seat and literally clapped at the last scene. But we'll get to that later, because this involves a huge spoiler, so we'll get to that later. First, let's start with what I overall think of Castlevania Nocturne. And the first thing I'm going to say, animation is fantastic. It's a step up from the original show, which says a lot, because I actually think the animation of already the first show was amazing. But I actually think Castlevania Nocturne animation is a huge step up. And also, I really loved how it was set in French Revolution. Obviously I already knew it from the trailers and all that it was going to be in French Revolution. And I still think the setting is simply amazing, because French Revolution is by far one of my favorite historical events. I really love learning about French Revolution. And I thought it was used very well, actually, and it was very recognizably French Revolution with the guillotine and all. So yeah, and I was also looking forward to see Richter Belmont and Maria Renard, and I have to say, these two were by far my favorite characters here. But this is also where the problems come in later, but yeah, Richter Belmont and Maria Renard were by far my favorite characters, and their backstories, like I, for example, really love how with Richter, we learn that he was actually originally lived in Boston, Massachusetts with his mother before she was killed by Orlocks, like we see in the trailers, and then he was sent to France. I love it pretty much, because when I lived in the United States for 8 years, Massachusetts is possibly my favorite state. Even though I lived in Rhode Island and Vermont, I think it's possibly Massachusetts is my favorite state with all its history and all. And so yeah, I really love the idea that it all started in Boston, Massachusetts, and then he moved to France. And also, and Maria Renard has some interesting backstory, and we learn a lot about her, as well as her mother too. And some of the twists that we learn about Maria Renard are really cool and interesting. And so yes, Richter Belmont and Maria Renard were by far my favorite two characters here. And every scene that involved them was just awesome. And when I reacted to the trailer and said Bloody Tears, I was wrong. The song is actually called Divine Bloodlines, and the song is actually only used, the music I mean, is only actually used in one scene, but that was incredible. And because as I was watching the show, I was worried that ultimately Divine Bloodlines was only in the trailer, it was just a fan bait, but I was very wrong. We did in fact get a excellent scene where the Divine Bloodlines fit very well, so yeah. But here also are some of my gripes and negatives. And that's kind of the character of Annette. Like, I know there was a huge controversy about switching her race on the internet, something that I had no problems with, especially that this was practically a completely different character than the Annette we know from the games, because the Annette from the games is like, she's barely even a character. She's like, yeah, this Annette barely resembles Annette from the games. In fact, the only thing they have in common is the name. I mean, I guess they could have simply changed her name, but whatever, it's just a name. But here comes my first gripe, like her backstory, how she lived in slavery and all. It was all interesting and well, but if I have to be honest, it seems like there was very clear political agenda, especially when her priestess of voodoo says, let's get rid of the god of white people. Like, that seemed a little slight attack on Christianity. So yeah, that was pretty cringy. Although, this was just one scene. So overall, while her backstory about being a slave and all, I don't think it was bad, but I do think some political messaging was a bit too much in your face there. And don't get me wrong, slavery is a horrible, awful thing. It was one of the worst crimes in human history, but I did feel it was a little bit too aggressive and in your face in this show. And then that's another gripe I had, because it honestly seemed to me later like Annette was basically became kind of like the main character of the first several episodes she came in, and I was really worried that Richter and Marie Renard were sidelined for Annette. But thankfully, come like the last third of the episode, and that's where Richter Belmont meets his grandfather, Just Belmont, and that's where things actually get awesome, because that's when Richter Belmont realizes his inner badass, and really the story becomes finally then more about him and Marie Renard. And it's also where we get a twist involving Marie Renard, that the abbot is actually her father. So I will also talk about the main villain, Elizabeth Bathory. Yeah, it's not really Elizabeth here, she's called Elizabeth, which is probably her original Hungarian name, and I have to say, she's a really evil villain, and she's scary and intimidating, so I think she's a very well done villain. I felt that she was going to be a good choice for a main villain in the Castlevania Nocturne, and I was right. I thought she was simply a really good villain. She was scary, she was intimidating, and she really felt like a threat. In fact, she really felt like a huge threat, and also the reveal that she was originally worshipped as Egyptian goddess Sekhmet, that was a pretty interesting take and reveal, and I really liked that, and I thought it fit very well in with the story. And so I think Elizabeth Bathory was a very perfect villain for the story. Here also come some of my other gripes with that. Like some of the monsters, or as they're called here, night creatures, forged by Forge Master. I actually think the night creatures that we see here look pretty awesome actually, but I don't feel there are that many of them. Like the previous Castlevania show had a lot more awesome looking night creatures. And also, it feels like they're kind of made up. Like the old Castlevania show, you could see lots and lots direct inspirations from the video games. But here, there aren't particularly many inspirations for the video games. I mean, it's entirely possible, but we'll see a lot more of it in the following seasons. But for now, I can't really say I'm ultra satisfied with the variety of monsters. I mean, the few dead monsters that we seen were actually pretty awesome looking, but I still wish there were more of them. Overall, I'm going to say Castlevania Nocturne is off to a good and promising start, but I really hope they improve on some of the problems that they did, this season had. Like, I wish we'll get a lot more Richter Belmont and Marie Renard like we got in the final few episodes, and slightly less political messaging. I thought it was good. It was enough in Annette's backstory, and let's hope that now they're going to mostly focus on the plan to defeat Elizabeth Bathory, and we get a lot more awesome night creatures. And now we're getting to my favorite scene, which is the very final scene, the very final scene that I brought up in the very beginning, and now I'll tell you what it was, because originally I didn't want to tell you because of spoilers, but now this is the very last thing I'll say in my review. So if you haven't seen it and don't want spoilers, please leave now, because now I'm going to reveal a very, very gigantic spoiler. So are you ready? Gigantic spoiler. Alucard! In the final scene, Alucard showed up, and he was as awesome and badass as ever, because one of Elizabeth Bathory's vampires was about to kill the company, and then Alucard just came in out of nowhere and defeated her, and it was an awesome badass moment, and I literally jumped out and clapped at that scene. So yeah, I was really worried Alucard is not going to be in this series, especially that he hasn't shown up at all, but I was so wrong. And that scene alone makes me now look forward to season 2. Because as I was watching, and as I was telling you, in some moments I felt like Richter was sidelined for Annette. I didn't know where this was going or not, but now Alucard alone makes me really look forward to season 2. So overall, Castlevania Nocturne is off to a promising start, but there is room for improvement. So here are my thoughts on Castlevania Nocturne. So, thank you for checking out this video. Press the like button. Please subscribe to this channel. Did you see Castlevania Nocturne? And talk to you later. Bye!